Welcome to Psych Sessions Re-Release. This is a curated series of episodes that we have recorded over the years that may have been lost in the library. So enjoy listening to some of the best from Psych Sessions.
This is a very special episode of Psych Sessions, conversations about teaching and stuff. I am here with Wayne Weiten from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Hi, Wayne.
Hey, Aaron. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. And I'm so thrilled that you agreed to do this. I think we started talking about this way in the before times, the pre-pandemic, probably over a dinner at some conference. The pandemic hit. And then I almost fear that you thought I was like a stalker. I think every 6 months to a year, I might have emailed and said, hey, want to do a podcast? Hey, want to do a podcast? Hey. And so thank you for agreeing to do this.
Well, you were very persistent, and I apologize for any reluctance that I displayed. But, I'm sort of self-conscious about this kind of thing, and I wanted some time to reflect and sort of find some preparation time before we sat down to talk. So I finally found it.
I appreciate that. And it's interesting. I mean, in some ways, how seriously you took that. Maybe that'll be a theme that we come back to, because I'll bet that seriousness has paid off in your teaching and your writing. And I suspect we can come back to that in a bit. So speaking of teaching, have you taught anything this past summer or in the middle of summer school or in the spring? What are you teaching these days?
Well, actually, I've got a big surprise in that I have finally retired from teaching as of this year.
Okay, so when was the last
class? My last class was in the fall, teaching of psychology.
Okay, so you walked away for the last time in December then?
Yeah, basically.
Okay, and so, wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations and condolences?
Both, absolutely both. It's a bittersweet moment brought on in part by the pandemic and all the travel opportunities that were lost. And we'd like more flexibility. In fact, just yesterday, I booked a trip to Europe for September, which obviously would not have been possible if I were teaching again in the fall. So, but it was, I mean, it's like I just lesioned off a huge part of my identity, and it does feel very weird. Very strange.
Well, but
all of this is tentative. You know what? I mean, hey, a year or two goes by, I get to spend a lot of time in Europe, and maybe I'll ask you to get back into the classroom. Who knows?
Oh, okay. Well, there's so much there to unpack. So first off, thanks for sharing that. Second, so many book authors, I think, keep their foot in the pond, their finger in the dam. I don't know what the analogy would be, because they're revising their books. Even if they're not in a classroom, they're still reading psych, they're revising, they're working on the revisions or the ancillaries. And so I suspect that if you're retiring from teaching, you're probably not retiring from authoring.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So, so you're still going to be connected in that way, which probably means you're still going to conferences and giving talks.
I will still be doing conferences.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Perhaps more than ever.
Right. I mean, some of our colleagues in the last 10 years who have retired, and for our listeners, I'm doing air quotes, retired to start doing more things in terms of projects. I'm thinking of, people like the Drew Applebys of the world, who retired and started writing more and wanted to be more task forces, which is great. But, you might have more time to do more things in psych and obviously out of psych.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if it worked out. It certainly seems to work out that way for a lot of other people. They seem to actually kick up their productivity in some respects. So
yeah,
who knows?
We may get to it a little bit later, but do you enjoy teaching online, or do you really just crave the face-to-face?
I prefer face-to-face. I mean,
Okay.
I couldn't have told you that until the last 2 years, because I had not taught online previously, and we did it all over Zoom, and it was fine, but I missed in person. There's just way more spontaneity, way more give and take.
Yeah.
and way more engagement on the part of the students.
Sure. And I was going to say, if 2 years from now you're hankering to get back in the classroom, you understand that you could teach an online intro psych for any college or university in the nation. You get that, right?
Well, I mean, geographically, that may be true. I don't know how many of them would have me, but I get the point about geography no longer being the barrier it once was.
Right. I mean, and I understand I can't speak for all institutions in the country. I guarantee you want to teach an online intro psych at Boise State University. Let's see, a new adjunct instructor for all of $3,300 for a three credit course. I think that might be tip money on your trip to Europe. Wayne, we'll talk to you whenever you're ready.
Well, all right, but to back up, I did want to elaborate a little bit on
Yep, please.
Because I've taught at and the how different they are. I think that's sort of what's interesting in terms of my career trajectory. I taught at three radically different institutional settings. I mean, so I began my career in the Illinois community college system. And that was fabulous. That was like almost the first 20 years of my career. And I enjoyed that immensely. I mean, I don't know, today I don't know that people can appreciate it, but at that time, community colleges were brand new. I mean, there have been a handful of 2-year schools around the country, but this was a movement and people were passionate about it. And it was a time and a place where there was a lot of innovation going on. People were open to innovation. We were trying to sort of reinvent how to teach the first couple of years of college. And it was great fun, but that was one environment, and then I moved on to Santa Clara University out in California, and that was a very elite private school. I mean, I didn't fully appreciate how elite selected they were until I got there, but their students were highly motivated, uniformly bright. They almost scared me sometimes. They were so motivated. But I really loved that as well. I mean, they had a really, really strong social justice kind of emphasis in school. I think in large part because of the Jesuit connection.
Sure.
And I came to really adore and appreciate Jesuits' contribution to education in our country. And so that was, just another radically different environment. And then starting in 2002, I came to UNLV, which is your classic flagship state university, became an R1, in the last decade or so, very diverse student body. And there, of course, the charming thing for me, I mean, I continued teaching intro and social at the undergraduate level, but starting like 17 years ago, I got to take over the teaching of psychology course with the grad students. So that was my first opportunity to work with PhD students, which again, was just a whole other ballgame for me. And I found very gratifying and very interesting. And so, so I've been teaching. That's what my main thing is, teaching the teaching of psychology course since I think it was 2004, maybe 2005. I'm not sure.
So you had 2 20-year careers, one at DuPage, one at UNLV. And how long at Santa Clara?
The 90s, basically. I think 9 years.
Well, okay, so I did the math wrong. Because you haven't been teaching for 49 years.
50. Took a couple of years off in there. I started in 1972.
Wayne, you didn't start teaching when you were 9 years old. Come on, man.
Well, that's one of the part of the upcoming story.
Okay.
So how I got into teaching, but it did happen at a very abnormally early age.
I just got to wrap my head around 50. Yeah, if you've been doing it for 50 years and you've just stepped away. So did you know in the fall that was your last semester teaching?
I didn't know going in, but as the semester wore on, I was thinking about it. And a lot of it is pandemic related. I kept thinking, I going, yeah, maybe pandemic is going to peter out. No, that would be one scenario, which with completely different implications. But that hasn't been the case. And so, it's something I kind of made a decision on the fly last fall, but I was certainly thinking about it for the fall.
But by the end of the semester, you had the notion that this is my last semester. For right now, my intention is this is my last semester in the classroom. And did did you invite dear friends? Did you invite your wife to come to your last lecture? I mean, or did you just kind of go cold and you just did it like it was a regular day?
No, first of all, it was all on Zoom.
Oh, it wasn't face to face.
Inviting anybody.
Oh, shoot.
And I did not mention it to the class. I went and talked to the department chair, I don't know, maybe a month or so, maybe 6 weeks before the end of the semester, and let him know, and asked him if I should say anything to the class. And he said, nah, let it go for now. So I just let it.
Yeah. It's really a shame, as much as you enjoyed face-to-face teaching, that you couldn't go out that last semester, that last week face-to-face.
That's true. Absolutely.
Yeah. That, whoever your best colleagues on campus were, or family members who could have been there, who could have sat in the back of the auditorium and just kind of been there for, I don't know if your campus does this, but we occasionally have a last lecture series. What would you tell students if you're giving your last lecture?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll have either faculty members about to retire or who have retired come back and give that. That would be fun to hear you give that. So I'll try to talk you into that at some point in time. So you told me a little bit about your chronology academically. If you'll permit me, or maybe you won't permit me, I don't know. You permit me to go even further back. So did mom and dad go to college when you were growing up? Was it, this is a question I ask all the time. Was it going to be, what college are you going to go to? Or was it going to be, what college? Do you have siblings? Did they go to college? How much, whatever you're willing to share, if anything, there.
Well, like yourself, I grew up in the Chicago area. I'm remembering correctly, right?
Wow. Yes. I'm honored.
And like yourself, I headed downstate for college. So we have some similarities. In my case, I grew up in Aurora, which is,
Sure.
When I was a kid, was like a city of about 65,000 that really didn't consider itself a suburb quite yet of Chicago, but the suburbs grew out and swallowed it up. So it certainly is a suburb now. My father was a carpenter. My mother was a homemaker. No college for either one of them. In fact, my father had to drop out of high school after his sophomore year to help out with the finances. He came from a family of 13 children, and they all needed to work as soon as they were capable of that. 4 siblings, 2 brothers, 2 sisters. As for the question about, was it a question of whether I'll go to college or which college it'll be? There was never any question I wanted to go to college. Okay. But there was no expectation of that whatsoever in our household, and really no way to finance it, really. So the question I faced was, how the heck am I going to go to college? Mm-hmm. Am I going to get anybody to accept me? Because I knew nothing about the process. And how in God's name will I ever pay for it? So that was my situation. So I came from the most wholesome, loving, supportive family on the planet. So I have nothing to gripe about in that regard whatsoever. But college was foreign to them. And so I was a true first-gen student who had no idea how to navigate that. And I just sort of did it by the seat of my pants. Now, what the big break for me was, I'm sure familiar with this, coming from Illinois. I ended up getting an Illinois State Scholarship, which, as you know, is not that exclusive by any means, no big deal. I didn't know they existed until it showed up in my mailbox. One day I got the mailbox and I got this thing that says they'll pay for my tuition up to X number of dollars or something. And I guess it was kind of need-based. So it actually covered all of tuition at the private school that I went to.
Wow.
And so that's how I managed to swing it. It's but not for that Illinois State Scholarship, I don't know what I would have done.
So Wayne, in 5 siblings altogether, where were you in the birth order?
I was the oldest.
Wow, you're the oldest. So obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, first to go to college?
Yes. Yeah.
Out of the 5?
I really showed you that there wasn't any pressure to go to college in this environment. I only have one sibling who went on and got a college degree.
Yeah,
They're all very bright. I mean, they breeze through college.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we both know plenty of people very bright who go on for fantastic careers who don't have to go to college, both back then and today.
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
Absolutely. What's the age gap between you and the other four, if you don't mind?
We were about 4-year intervals roughly until my youngest sister. So
Gotcha.
17 years total between myself and my youngest sister.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Did you just apply to one college to go to, or did you apply to a bunch of private schools in Illinois?
I didn't have enough. I'm naive. I knew nothing.
Okay. No.
I just applied to Bradley and to U of I, but U of I scared me. It was just too large, too intimidating.
I'm not trying to compliment myself, but in some really phenomenal ways, our paths are pretty parallel. I applied to two schools, one private and the U of I. Except mine was Monmouth College and not Bradley.
No, I remember
Private
that.
liberal arts and U of I. And when you got to Bradley, did you start off majoring in psychology, or what's the story there?
No, I went to Bradley thinking I wanted to be an attorney, thinking I'd go to law school. Not sure why I thought I wanted to go to law school. I don't remember really any motivation, but I just working from total naivete. So that sounded good in theory. And so I was planning on pre-law and political science. I was kind of political at the time. And freshman year, I had introduction to political science and introduction to psychology. And introduction to political science had and they both occurred in the exact same theater-like room that held about 250 freshmen. Both the courses did. And the intro to political science had a very charismatic instructor who was very, very lively. And the course bored me into tears. He was interesting, but the subject matter, God, did it bore me. Whereas with psychology, it was team taught by the entire department. Some of the instructors were very charismatic and some were not. And the book I learned later was Howard Kendler, which was a good, solid, reputable book, but dry as hell. And yet in spite of those disadvantages, I loved psychology. I just found it fascinating. And so at the end of the year, I switched from pre-law political science to pre-law psychology. I'm still planning on going to law school. And then at the end of junior year, I happened to pick up something in a bookstore randomly, a book called The Lawyers. And I now know it was really a hatchet job on the legal profession, but it was a really horribly negative profile of law as a profession. I decided they were all unethical and I wanted nothing to do with it. And again, what a bucket, you know? I mean, if I had any trouble,
but you're being too hard on yourself. But okay, it's your story. I'll let you tell it.
So anyway, I decided forget law school, and so then I decided I'd go on in psychology.
The Howard Kendler book, I think I've seen it, but it's like a tome, right? I mean, it's all text, no photos, no. I mean, it's almost like a history of psychology type textbook.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. But that's interesting. The power of the instructors bringing it to life, and wow, the department team teaching it. I've heard of that model where everybody comes in and does 2 weeks on their gig, and that's a tough model.
Yeah, I think they abandoned it like 4, 5, 6 years later.
I can get it. So did you graduate with the double major?
No, just psychology.
Okay. And did you get excited about research as an undergrad at Bradley? Did you go to MPA? Were you involved in psych? What kind of undergrad were you?
Well, I mean, I got into psych. Actually, I really spread things around. I mean, what I liked about Bradley was it was big enough that you're still meeting people like when you're still a senior, but small enough that you could experiment with a lot of different things. So, I mean, I didn't just focus in a narrow way on psychology. Mm-hmm. One year I did the debate team. One year I wrote for the newspaper. Throughout my stay there, I was on the radio station doing music shows, and I became news and sports director and did play-by-play Bradley basketball on the radio.
That's awesome.
Here's the cool part. My mentor, a student who was a year ahead of me, went on to fame and fortune as a sports broadcaster. He went on to become the voice of the Yankees and the voice of the Dodgers. Can you believe that?
Wow. You're not talking about.
I had a big sportscaster were quickly dashed by the fact that he was 10 times as good as I was.
You're not talking about Vin Scully.
No. Charlie Steiner.
Oh, okay. I know that name.
Radio voice of the Yankees. He had a 10 or 15 year career at ESPN. He's still the radio voice of the Dodgers.
Wow. Wayne. Yeah,
I got to do a lot of different things, and so no, I don't recall. There were a couple of faculty I think who took people to NPA for Bradley, but not anyone that I was working with, or at least not at that time. So I did not go as an undergrad to any conferences. I did get started my senior year with Claire Retog getting involved in research, and that was kind of a little late in terms of the grad school application process.
So did you take a gap year, or did you know you wanted to go to grad school? Did you get a real job, as some people say? What happened after you graduated?
Well, almost got a gap year, but not intentionally. Again, the naivete comes into play, and then this story is going to lead into how I ended up getting into teaching very prematurely. I decided I wanted to go to grad school, wanted to go get a PhD, but I did not consult the faculty, even though there were several that I was pretty close to. I don't know what I was thinking. I only applied to 2 schools, not at all factoring in that those schools might have lots of stellar applicants who might be a better fit, in terms of research interest than I might be. And I got rejected by both.
Okay.
And so I'm sitting there going, oh my God. Now, the way I got through high school was being a line cook at Mr. Steak. I was thinking, I'm back to Mr. Steak.
A line cook at Mr.
Steak. You want to know my unknown talents. If you ever need someone who can grill 30 steaks at once, I'm your man.
Right.
So anyway, I was devastated because I had no plan B whatsoever. So, I applied to 2 schools, excellent schools, I might add. I mean, wasn't thinking about a safety school, wasn't thinking, but they were both far away too. There's no way on earth I had the money to move to these places. So, I mean, this was like the worst plan in history. I was reflecting on this the other day. I am seriously introverted, and I'm going to move across the country to someplace where I know no one. I mean, I don't know.
But maybe that's the introvert's dream, right? No one there, so no one will talk to you.
Okay. All right. I guess that might have worked. So anyway, I was devastated when these 2 wonderful institutions declined my interest in joining their PhD program. So I went to Claire Retog, who I've been working on some research with, explained to her. And she said, well, you know what? We have a master's program, which I did it. And said, we certainly haven't filled all our spots. We can certainly take you into our master's program. And I said, deal. I accept. And so that's how I ended up pursuing an MA at Bradley. And
so Claire, knowing that you were her student, hadn't talked to you about, just didn't do the natural mentoring thing. Hey, where are you applying?
I had spread myself out too thinly. I mean, my first real exposure to Claire was senior year.
Gotcha.
So I had really worked more with other people, and it was my fault, but I didn't go and talk to them. But I had several people that I was close to, but I foolishly did not consult them.
Well, okay, so wait. Now here's where I get myself in trouble. I shouldn't really argue with you or try to correct you. I don't think it was foolish. I just think you were a first-gen college student. It's not that you foolishly made an error. You just didn't know what to do.
Well, no, that's true. And a lot of it was naivete. I'll grant you that. Although the not going to talk to people that I was friendly with and who had expertise was stupid. That part was stupid.
Well, but that hindsight. But wait, that hindsight's 2020 though, right?
All right, true.
I mean, when you're in it, it's hard to know what to do perfectly. But it is your story. When I hear Bill McKeechee say things like, I was just lucky, it's like, Bill, you worked your butt off for 60 years. Applications didn't fall into your lap by accident. It wasn't just luck. I mean, anyway, I'll stop. So you were on the route to telling me how you got into teaching, how you got into higher ed.
Well, yeah, and it doesn't take long. It only takes a month from the. It's a really weird story. So come fall, I started in the master's program at Bradley. And 1 month or maybe 6 weeks into the semester, there's a nearby community college called Illinois Central College. And they call up the department head in psych. And they explain to him that we just promoted one of our psych faculty into an administrative position. Just got the promotion literally yesterday. And he needs to drop 2 of his sections of intro psych out of the 5 that he's teaching. So, I mean, he's not dropping them all at once, but he needs to drop 2 of his sections. And they're daytime sections. So there are not a lot of people floating around who can pick up daytime sections in the middle of a semester. Do you have anybody among your graduate students who could perhaps come in and pick up these 2 sections of introduction to psychology? And the department chair put a little note in my box, come see me. And he told him, well, he said, yes, I think I've got something I can say.
So at that point, you don't have your master's yet.
I've only got 1 month of grad school, maybe 6 weeks. I don't recall exactly.
So are you 22 years old?
Not yet. Well, I don't know. I don't remember exactly when it was. I turned 22 in late September, so I might have been 21.
Oh my God, you're a 21-year-old with your bachelor's degree teaching 2 sections of intro psych.
On 1 weekend's notice.
Ah.
I know. It was a little crazy.
Isn't this a Netflix horror flick? Oh my gosh. What not to do to a teacher?
Here's why it's not a Netflix horror flick. So, all right. So on 1 weekend morning, I went in the following Tuesday and I just scrambled all weekend to create lectures out of nowhere, out of nothing, using 2 intro psych books that I could find around, from all my various roommates. So I had the one that I had one other somebody else had. And I pieced together lectures. I was only staying like a day ahead of the class.
Yep.
But I walked into that classroom and it was joy from the first moment. It was just like, this is so much fun. I mean, I found out that I really loved looking into all this stuff and figuring out how to organize it and explain it and make sense out of it and come up with concrete examples and just even creating the lectures. I just thrived on that. And then when I got in the classroom, I just enjoyed it so much that it was like a revelatory experience where, 2 weeks into the semester or 2 weeks into my teaching, I'm going, this is what I'll do. God, I love this.
All right. So where did that come from? This is the young man who didn't know anything about college systems or graduate school processes, who all of a sudden finds his calling that's going to follow him for 50 years. Dr. Weiten, where does that come from?
Well, I sat through a lot of classes.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you're going to have joy in doing it yourself on 48 hours notice.
No, that was a surprise. I didn't anticipate that. Obviously, I said yes because, wow, I could use money. Sure. And I said yes because, yeah, I'll figure it out. I'll figure out a way to make this happen. And what I didn't anticipate was just the sheer joy that I experienced in doing it. Obviously, I was doing it incompetently or borderline competently at best, but I sure found it to be fun.
Well, interactions, don't we all do that? I mean, I've told this story on other recordings. My first time teaching intro psych, I found the very best textbook I thought was available at the time, and I did not adopt it for my class. I kept it for my lecture notes, and then I adopted some other book for them, but I kept the best, clearest book for myself. I am not kidding. I am not making that up. That is absolute truth.
I had not heard that one. All right, that's fascinating.
And that may be borderline an ethical violation. I don't know, but that is the truth. So you were hooked from almost day one, if not day one.
Yeah, kind of. And it just came out of nowhere.
Well, Do you have any recollection what year that was?
Well, 1972, the fall of 72.
72. Well, damn, you're right. You're a semester short of 50 years, aren't you? Or you're a semester more than 50 years. I'd have to.
No, I'm not going to back and check for sure, but it's right around 50 years.
Yeah. 72 to 22 is 50 years. My goodness. So was it the newness of teaching that drew you to STP and Society for Teaching of Psychology?
All right. STP that all came from Mac.
So do you want to talk about
our listeners may not have any idea what
Mactop?
Pardon me?
We'll talk about books first or Mactop?
Well, all right. Actually, I did get a book done before I got booked on Mactop. So let me back up.
Okay.
So, because I guess the end of this story is this is sort of how I ended up in the community college system instead of going directly in for a PhD. I taught all that year at Illinois Central College, and I loved it. And I made clear to them that I was interested in an opening if they had one. They took a while to figure that out. So I also applied to another college, another Central Illinois community college, Lincoln Land Community College.
Oh, sure.
And I had no idea if I'd be able to get a job. So I also did apply for PhD programs. And this time I was a little more crafty. And
you were earning your master's along the way.
True. And so I got into PhD programs, and the one I was going to go to if I did not get a job was Washington University in St. Louis.
Awesome.
Whew. Yeah, that would have been. And I often reflect on, wow, how things might have been different if I had. But I did land a job at eventually both Lincoln Land and Illinois Central offered me teaching positions. And I went with Lincoln Land because they offered 50% higher salary, which was only $12,000 when you calculate what ICC was. So I went on to Springfield for 2 years and taught at Lincoln Land. So that was my first full-time experience as a community college.
And what's Lincoln Land called today?
I think it's still Lincoln Land.
Is it really? Oh, okay.
I think so. It's in the Springfield area, down by Lake Springfield, and all these places. That's the interesting thing about being a community colleges back then. They were all just building out their campus.
Right.
God, at Lincoln Land, when I first showed up, we were in Quonset huts where sometimes people broke through the floor. It was rotting away.
Wow.
It was so cheaply made. But second semester, we moved into a really nice campus, and I enjoyed the 2 years there. Problem was there was no way to pursue a PhD while, in Springfield. So then I started looking around for a community college in Chicago, and managed, after 2 years at Lincoln Land, I managed to land at College DuPage. And so
you started at DuPage and you worked on your PhD at the same time.
Yes, I started at DuPage in 75, and then I didn't even go through the normal application process. I just I don't know. I reached out to, all right, so there were 6 PhD programs in Chicago, but 3 of them were too far to drive. I mean, there was just no way on earth. Chicago.
Right.
There's no way I was going to do Western suburbs, working full-time, and do Northwestern. That was just a physical impossibility. And so I reached out to DePaul and the University of Illinois, Chicago, and inquired if, sent them my information and inquired whether they might be willing to allow me to continue teaching full-time at DuPage and, go through their PhD program. And then they both said yes, amazingly. So I ended up at University of Illinois.
UIC.
University of Illinois, Chicago Circle at the time.
Yeah. Circle. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. So that's why I couldn't figure out the math earlier. That's why I was shocked at 50 years.
Yeah.
You did master's and doctoral work the same time you were teaching. Your teaching career was going on the same time as you're gaining your education.
Mm-hmm.
So does that help explain why you've been so prolific as a writer? You've always multitasked?
Well, it certainly hasn't hurt, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I know other people.
I didn't learn to keep a lot of balls in the air. Yeah. I think back now, it's crazy. I mean, a full-time load at community college, 15 hours. And I actually taught an overload every semester. So I was actually doing 20 hours.
Of course you did.
And worked on the PhD at the same time. So
And you probably did a few extra projects here and there for faculty members because you wanted to have some extra research exposure, or because somebody asked you and you were eager and you made the time because that's who you were. Faculty members figured out who they could count on. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm sorry, Wayne. I'm just trying to.
I just have to interject. A massive thank you to Harry Upshaw at the University of Illinois, who was willing to take me on. Apparently there was some pushback. I learned like 2 years into the program. Department wasn't entirely keen on you doing this, but one of the young faculty had shared this with me later. But Harry had been a former head of the department, and his confidence carried a lot of weight, and so then he decided to let me try. But
I think they tell graduate students, we prefer you not have a full-time job. They want your graduate work to be your full-time job, right?
yes, of course,
And
I get that.
But at the same time, that you did it and did it successfully, post hoc confirmed his confidence in you that you could do it, and you didn't let them down, and you probably paved the way for the next student who came along and said, I want to work full time while attending this program. Well, that Wayne Weiten guy did it. You probably can too. Let's give him a chance. Let's give her a chance, or whatever. Absolutely. So, and I've kind of either asked you in dinner conversation or in writing or in email correspondence, you started doing research about intro psych. And I know we're going to talk about textbooks at some point, and this kind of gets us there a little bit. So you wrote some really cool stuff, late 80s, early 90s, and you had what I think still to this day is an influential textbook chapter with Randall White about intro psych textbooks. When you started doing that research, were you like, I'm just interested in this topic because I teach the class, I want to know? Or was it, I have an idea to write a textbook and this is going to be a good foundation? Or was it just serendipitous? Or do you remember the timeline or how that came together?
Yeah, I could answer the question easily. For some, I don't know why. Not quite sure how to explain this. But from the moment I got involved in teaching, I became a shameless fanboy of textbooks. I just, when I learned that they would roll in for free, I could go to FPA and just say, send me that one, and that one. It was just like, whoa, my God, this is so cool. And so I ordered everything. I taught everything so I could order everything. And I was just a hopeless fanboy for textbooks. A new textbook would roll in, come in via mail and show up in the mailbox. And I'd savor it. I'd study it. I'd look it over. And I'd find a wonderful place on my bookshelf for it. I'd go back to it. I just had this thing for textbooks. I don't know why. And so I was always interested in them. And so it was just an interest in textbooks that drove the interest in doing some research on textbooks. And then getting into authorship kind of sort of made that research peter out because it sort of felt a little weird.
Well, I understand that. First off, you're going to get criticized no matter what. So we know that. But someone could have come along and said, well, you're doing the research to further your textbook. Well, you're also publishing that research. Anybody can come along and use it for their textbook. It's not like you kept it proprietary. It's interesting that you fanboy geek out on books. Were there books at that time that you remember, either intro psych or others, that you just really went, oh my gosh, this really hit home with my students, or this really hit home with me in graduate school? Or are there any standouts for you?
I wouldn't even know where to start if I start reminiscing about textbooks that I loved.
The
rest of the interview.
Our listeners can't see this, but I'm presuming Wayne's in his home office and he's sitting in front of a bunch of fake books, a fake bookshelf with hundreds of books behind him. These fake things you can buy from Amazon where they're just cardboard cutouts. I think he does love his books. He's probably got dozens of those bookshelves throughout the house and the in the home. So your Intro Psych textbook was not the first textbook that you wrote. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So can you tell our listeners about the psychology of adjustment?
I can. I think it's another sort of cute story. I mean, it's just like the teaching thing. It's just weird how I got into the writing. So I'm teaching at DuPage, and I've been teaching the adjustment course now for 5 years. It's 1978. And back in those days, sales reps were all around the campuses of schools, vastly more so than today, and vastly more of them because there were 20 publishers publishing in psychology at that time. And so this gentleman comes in from West Publishing, sales rep, 1978. And now a lot of my colleagues didn't really like talking to the sales reps. They thought it was a real pain in the butt. But being the textbook fanboy that I was, I talked to them all day. They just sent me more books, you know? So I welcomed them with open arms. And that was so unusual. So they kind of like that. So anyway, this rep was selling a new adjustment textbook. And so he went through his spiel about how this is going to be a great adjustment textbook. And I'm sure I told him something like, well, I'll certainly take a look at it. But I launched in what probably was a 6, 7, 8 minute monologue. What is wrong with all the adjustment textbooks that are out there today? I looked and studied all 20 or 25 of them, and I had problems with each and every one.
And that was a course you were already teaching?
Yeah, that was the first course I was hired to teach at Lincoln Land was adjustment. They wanted somebody to cover adjustment. And then, of course, I did intro as well.
And Wayne, is that your specialty area?
Well, it's not really. It's really like calling intro your specialty area. But
Okay.
but I was willing to teach it. I'd had the course as an undergrad, a really good version of the course, and I felt comfy with it. And so I sold myself as being able to teach adjustment at Lincoln Land. And then when I moved out to DuPage, they had the course. And although they brought me in, they were trying to cover child development at that time, which I taught to them a lot. I also picked up the adjustment.
Okay.
And I've been teaching it for 5 years and had some very strong opinions on the books, which I thought were collectively getting dated and too easy and too soft. And I could go on, but again, that would bore everyone into oblivion. But anyway, so I do this like monologue about the adjustment textbooks. And this rep looks at me and says something to the effect, can't say it. I remember precisely, it says, if you're that unhappy with all the books out there, realize you can write your own. And
there it is.
I was stunned to hear those words. I mean, it just utterly, utterly, utterly stunned. The thought had not really ever occurred to me. I probably looked at him like there were tentacles growing out of his head all of a sudden or something. I mean, I was that surprised. And wait a minute. I mean, I said, look, I thought that writing textbooks was the privilege of successful professors who, first of all, have their PhD, unlike me. And secondly, are teaching at prestigious institutions and have years of experience. You're telling me that I could write a book and you wouldn't throw it out just immediately? And his response was, well, you know what? I mean, you're mostly right. I mean, most textbook authors are at prestigious four-year schools. And yeah, a lot of them are very accomplished researchers, but we have published people out of community colleges and we've had some successful books that way. And so it is possible. What? Wow. Okay. That's given me food for thought. And I went home and started working on it.
Did he suggest that you write for him, for his company?
Well, he suggested they would certainly be interested.
Okay. All right.
So I started researching how you go about that. I managed to find a couple of books that were written on how to write a textbook, because I had no one to really talk to about it. So I read up on it and then got to work on it. And over the next 6 to 8 months, I said, yeah, I'll write an adjustment textbook. Sounds like fun. So over the next 6 to 8 months, I put together a prospectus and I wrote 2 sample chapters, as I said you should do. And then I, compiled a list of 5 publishers to send it to. And I compiled the second list of 5 because I assumed, I thought it was like journal articles. I thought the rejection rate would be 90%. And so I assumed, very high probability that no one would be interested. And so I sent off this package to 5 publishers that I thought might be able to use an adjustment textbook. And with not a lot in the way of high expectations, I might add. And again, surprise, surprise, you just never know what's going to happen. But all 5 quickly got back to me expressing an interest in publishing it.
And I'm assuming West was one of those 5 that you sent it to.
Yeah, West was one of the 5.
Yeah. So this may be jumping ahead way too far. Wayne, is there ever a point in your life that you can identify where you overcame your imposter phenomenon?
No, I'm still going through it like everybody else.
Oh, man. I was hoping you had an epiphany moment. I'm sorry. Because wouldn't that have been it? You send off the 5, you've got it back. So, I mean, the humility award of the year, you've got it, right? I mean, no one's going to.
No, I disagree.
With all due respect, you're wrong, right? You've prepared this prospectus. You've never done it before in your life. You find 2 books. How adorable is that, really? What year? 1979? What is it? You find 2 books on how to write a book. You write a prospectus. You send it off, and 5 publishers tell you they're interested. That wouldn't happen today. It might not even happen to you with your name.
Another story, but
what's that?
That would not happen today, and I that's something I want to discuss later. But
yeah, but oh my gosh, you would think that after that, your imposter phenomenon would at least have a syndrome would have started to fade a little bit. But it's okay.
Hell, I still didn't have a PhD. I mean, my God!
But it was pretty clear you didn't need it. Would it have gotten you a better contract or a better deal?
I have no idea.
Did you sign with West?
So I had the luxury, obviously, since all 5 of them wanted it, I had the luxury of being selective and talking to each one of them at length about how I would fit in with their other adjustment books. And I figured out that the thing to do is grill them on how excited they are about the book and how much they're going to, kind of put into it, so forth. And West finished maybe 3rd out of the 5. The last 2 were Brooks Cole and Addison Wesley.
I haven't heard those names in a while.
Yeah, I know they don't even exist. They've all been folded into international conglomerates.
Right.
But so those were my final 2. I really love both editors, but I especially love the editor from Brooks Cole.
Brooks Cole.
Yeah.
And who did they become? Thompson? They
did. Yes, Brooks Cole and Wadsworth were always sister companies, and then they finally began to sort of, and back at this time, they competed. And they competed still through the 1980s, the editorial departments did, but then when Thompson bought the 2 of them, they kind of combined them and started buying up other companies like Southwestern. And so Thompson is one that grew them into a conglomerate. And then Thompson, of course, sold off to some leveraged buyout firm that sent and renamed it Cengage. And of course, they ended up bankruptcy. That was a whole other story. So.
But now the adjustment book is under the Cengage banner.
Yes. Going into its 13th edition.
That's a legacy right there. I mean, getting the book published is amazing. Getting into its 2nd edition is a real accomplishment. But 13 is an unheard of, seriously. Yet
at the time, I thought just getting it written would be an accomplishment.
Well, yes, exactly. But I mean,
after I signed the contract, I'm going, what the hell were you thinking? I'm committed to having this book written.
Well, okay, yeah. So
amount of time.
Even in my world, I've had that experience where you think the hard work's the prospectus, and then you go, oh, now I got to write the damn thing.
But yeah, no, it went on to be, obviously pretty successful. And now it's going into its 13th edition with 2 marvelous co-authors and the persons of Dana Dunn and Elizabeth Hammer. And so I think it has a very, very bright future. And hopefully it'll see 20 editions. We'll see.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So Was there something specific you wanted to share that what you learned from that?
Just maybe a brief ode to the editor who signed me, Claire Verdoyne. I mean, she took me under her arm, so to speak, and really taught me about publishing. It was so enlightening. I mean, she was an older, in comparison to me anyway, an older lady. Well, in comparison to all the other editors. Her fellow editors, Brooks Cole, called her mother publisher. She was probably in her late 50s. And she kind of adopted me. And every year at MPA and MPA, we would have flag dinners where I would just grill her for information on the craft of publishing, textbook publishing in particular. And I got an incredible education. She was just a darling to do that. Probably did some of a disservice to her employer in terms of all the things she shared with me. But she was just a wonderful woman to whom I'm deeply indebted, and for her educating me on the intricacies and dynamics of textbook publishing.
Does this success kind of lead you to start thinking about an intro psych venture? How does MacTop fit in? Does STP start to come into play? I know I've heard a themes and variations story from Jane Hallinan. I think I've heard it from you over dinner, but I'd love at some point for you to fit that in to our conversation as well.
Oh, absolutely. Well, all right, let's talk MacTop, because that's something else that deserves its
yes.
recognition. That is how I got started with STP. MacTop was the Mid-America Conference for Teachers of Psychology, founded, I think, in like 1984 by Joe Palladino at University of Southern Indiana in Evansville. And I did not attend the first year, but second year I definitely headed down in, I think, 85, that would have been. And again, it was, I'm overusing this word, but it was a kind of a revelatory experience coming together with all these faculty who were so passionate about teaching. I mean, I had a lot of colleagues at DuPage who were passionate too, but we were a small group. This is, 80, 90 people getting together that are just so hardworking, so dedicated, so creative. And so Palladino, I think, really deserves a lot of credit for putting that together. And it became a model. These conferences based on this model started popping up all over the country. And so he created that model and deserves credit for that. But in terms of how that translated into STP, it brought me together on an annual basis with a incredible array of people who were already active in STP or who soon became active.
That's right.
Well, it wasn't even STP then, I should add, but in Division II of APA. So for instance, at MacTop was the first place that I met Charles Brewer, Randy Smith, Steve Davis, Barney Bynes, Janet Matthews, and they were already officers or admin officers of Division II. It's also where I met for the first time Jane Hallinan, Bill Hill, Drew Appleby, Ruth Alt, Tom Pusateri, Bill Addison. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So as you can well imagine, sooner or later, they roped me into getting involved with Division II, which proved to be a wonderful decision on my part, because that again proved to be something that really enhanced my growth as an academic and as an instructor. So it all grew out of MacTop in terms of getting involved with what we now call STP. All right, where were we?
Were you incubating ideas for intro psych? I've been told a couple of times a famous or infamous story. You and Ruth Alt having a conversation about themes and variations that comes out of MacTop?
Yes, it did. All right, I keep backtracking on you. I want to make sure we hit all the.
It doesn't have to be in chronological order.
All right. Well, one thing I want to mention, you inquired about the research, and I had quite finished.
Right.
That was another surprise. And so that 1988 article, what we did is I was at DuPage and undergrads, and I was working with. We looked at 43 textbooks, looked at 29 objective features of those textbooks. Some were simple, like how many authors it has, what edition it's in, stuff like that. Others really require a lot of painstaking calculation. How many references per chapter? What is the overall recency of those references? We even calculated manuscript length in words. It's page is such a crude indicator of the length of the book. And then we use those to predict professors' perceptions of those 43 books in terms of what level they were, how scholarly they were, capacity to engage student interest, stuff like that. And so that I began that back in like 85, 86. It didn't come out until 88, but that ended up triggering apparently a cascade of research of that ilk.
Yeah,
Which,
I got one of those in there in 93.
I hope I'm quoting him reasonably accurately. Years later, I was talking to Rich Griggs, and he said that 88 article is what got him going. He said, I looked at your 88 article and I saw 40 or 50 future articles, which he proceeded to crank out. So he single-handedly almost turned it into a whole line of research. So I did not see that coming. But it was not really motivated by trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my next book. I mean, it was sort of relevant, but I didn't really think I'd come up with anything that practical. And to be honest, I didn't. It was more just the geek in me wanting to know about what seems to work for textbooks, but what affects, it should have yielded more useful information, but it didn't really.
Well, but wait, and also hearing you tell your story about how you fanboy out about textbooks, that puts it all in context. I mean, this research gave you an excuse to gather 43 books together. I mean, that really kind of puts it into context.
Yeah, it did allow me to get the most recent edition of everything.
Right. You're writing to all these publishers. May I please have your most recent edition of all your intro psych textbooks? All of them. They will not be returned. Sincerely, Wayne Weiten. Yeah.
That was a little self-theft, wasn't it?
It wasn't theft. Was not theft at all. You told them what you were using it for. Yeah. And so were you presenting that at MacTop?
I presented it at APA. I don't remember if I presented that at MacTop. I don't know. May or may not have. Not sure. But, you mentioned the chapter, the history chapter that I did co-authored with Randall White.
Yes.
That was fun. That was so much fun.
That's huge.
And Randall really did the hard work here. He did the early stuff, the first 4 decades or so. I would have known nothing about that stuff, but it was just fascinating to learn about the early texts written by John Dewey, William James, and Edward Titchener, and Woodworth, and Floyd Rue, and so forth. So that was fun. That was a lot of fun. And so I got a kick out of that article. And I guess the comment I'd make on that one was I wish someone would go back and update that. Only it was a history up through the 1980s. So we were so close to the 1980s, we really didn't know anything about the 1980s. So it really only goes up through the 1970s. So there's 50 years that's gone by since then. And so if there are any other fanboys out there who think that sounds intriguing, I think that's something that would be really interesting to look at.
I actually know 2 guys who are working on updating that as we speak.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't mean to be coy, but you're talking to one of them. Yeah. We should talk off microphone sometime.
All right, that's cool.
Yeah, you know the other one too.
Great idea. I think it's time.
Yeah. Yeah. The other one's last name rhymes with Gurung. I'll just say it that way.
Oh, I had a pretty good hunch who the other one was.
Yeah, we need a project from time to time. So.
Oh, yeah, right. I know. You guys.
Well, we need one together. That
nothing going on.
That's the excuse. So, when you identified themes and variations, because you've done the analysis, had you not seen that in intro psych texts before, or how did that come about?
Okay, no one was using that. No one was working with that, although that was not my initial plan for intro psych. So after I did the adjustment book and that came out and it worked out really well, that one was motivated basically by my complete dissatisfaction with what was out there. And I thought I could build a better mousetrap. That wasn't true for intro. And that was a different kind of motivation. I actually, so I did the one book. It was clear that there was going to be another book in my future. The question was what? I went back and forth between social and intro. But I'm still, in a community college environment. So you don't have the sort of the authority to write just any book. It's got to be something that's taught in your realm.
I keep interrupting you. How did you know it was clear there was going to be another book in your future?
Well, just because I enjoyed it so much.
Okay.
I knew I'd write another one.
Okay. All right.
So in this case, it was more Brooks Cole came to me, and there was some back and forth about which way was better to go. But their editor for Intro Psych really wanted me to do the intro book. And so here I can't look you in the eye and tell you that I thought I could build a better mousetrap. But I guess I thought I could build a better one than Brooks Cole had competing in the market. And they were eager for that. They had a track record of unsuccessful entries in Intro Psych.
Who was the editor? Do you remember who signed you?
Oh, absolutely. Remains a very close friend to this day. C. Deborah Lawton was her name. And she goes on.
I don't think I knew her, but the name sounds familiar. Would she have attended MPAs back in the 90s?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
that's probably where. And
Yep.
And you might not want to go here. What would have been the leading Brooks Cole book at the time that you aimed to replace?
Well, they had Wrightsman, but that hadn't worked out. They had a little bit of success with Le Francois, but then in the second edition, it just had no legs. They had a book by John Ruch, R-U-C-H. Actually, it was excellent. It was a superb book, but for some reason, it was a marketing failure that went nowhere.
That's not the same Rook as in Rook and Zimbardo, is it?
No, same spelling. But
Yeah, okay.
That person was Floyd Rue, who spelled it R-U-C-H.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And he was the first person to write an introduction to psychology, intentionally tried to make it interesting. In 1937.
I actually have one of those later editions that my older brothers used in college. I have a Rue and Zimbardo book.
Wow.
Where Zimbardo was not the first author yet.
Treasure that.
Because they flipped at one point.
They did in the 60s. They flipped.
Oh my God.
Rue was retired by that. I mean,
you are a fanboy.
Oh, I am.
Sorry, I keep interrupting you. So, you were talking about the research. I'm sorry. Yeah. And you were getting to themes and variations.
I was getting to where the themes came from. So anyway, C-Deb signed me to do an intro psych book for Brooks Cole. And of course, you have to cast around for some idea about what are you going to do that's going to be different, what's going to set your book apart. And what I came up with was something that had not been done previously, that I thought was pretty intriguing, clever idea. And that was, I wanted to write the first modular book, the first book with a modular organization that is breaking the chapters up into 3 or 4 or 5 self-contained modules, which of course has become somewhat common in intro psych. But at the time, there was no such thing. Unfortunately, I am 3 chapters into my intro psych book when in 1986, out come 2 modular textbooks, thereby ruining my plans.
Who are they by?
Jim Callett came out with his intro psych,
Callett, yeah,
which was modular. I mean, they didn't make a massive deal about it, but it was a modular book.
Yeah.
And Rod Plotnick at McGraw-Hill came out with a modular book.
They knew both those.
Simultaneously, no less. Exact same year in 1986, just as I've written 3 chapters in a modular format. And I'm going, oh, hell. Now what? Oh, at that point, I was like, really, wow, what the? I really was kind of flabbergasted. I didn't see that coming. Obviously, I guess I was sort of on the right track, and other people were thinking that way. I mean, those books both have had good long runs, so they were successful. So anyway, back to the drawing board, and I had no clue what I was going to do. I kept writing, but I had no clue what I was going to do in terms of coming up with a creative, different angle that would give the book, and I did it. And so I headed down in the fall of 1986 to the 3rd MacTop, and God bless MacTop. That changed everything. They had a panel on the introductory course. Joe Palladino served as the moderator. And I had to go, this is again why I wanted to do my homework before we sat down and talked. I mean, I had to go digging in my files. Would you believe I have the first I have all the programs for the first 8 Mac tops, even though I didn't go to the first one. But I still have the programs for those first 8 Mac tops. And otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to tell you who was on the panel and so forth. But the panel was moderated by Joe Palladino. And the panelists were Steve Davis, Randy Smith, Ruth Alt, and Drew Rapidly. Just sit and listen, and it's getting towards the end of the time that was allocated to it. And it's been interesting, but nothing breathtaking. And Ruth gets up and just as an aside says something to the effect that, one problem I have or something I wish they'd change about intro psych books. She didn't make a huge deal out of it. She said, there's so much content and it's poured into these 16 or 18 or 20 buckets that seem unrelated. And I really lament the lack of any effort to come up with some themes to integrate all this disparate content. And she didn't hammer on it or anything. I mean, I think it was, maybe a minute of her talk, but that light bulb clicked on immediately. I thought, damn, she's right. She's absolutely right. No one has ever done anything with themes. And that would make sense. I mean, God, that would help students to be able to absorb or assimilate these massive quantities of information. If you could tie it to some overarching ideas and it would allow you to pick themes that you can burn into their brains forevermore. I just went right away and oh God, that's so cool. I didn't say anything to Ruth because I had no idea, whether I'd be able to, a lot of times you have ideas that you think are good ideas and then you go to execute them and it's all fall flat.
Oh yes.
It's a miserable failure. So I said nothing to Ruth until 2 or 3 years later when the book was actually coming out, I think. But I decided to try and run with that. And so I polled all my DePage fellow faculty in psych about, what do you think the themes ought to be? Because I had no idea what the themes would be. Themes, that sounds good. What would they be?
Oh, that's great.
So I polled the DePage faculty at first, and I got some really good ideas from them. And then the following year at MacTop, I polled a much larger, more diverse audience to get some more insight to it. And then that allowed me to formulate my 6 themes that we launched with. And I eventually added 7th a couple of editions later.
And Wayne, why I really appreciate that, first off, that origin story, I just think it's great to have that recorded. I mean, I've heard it a couple of times, but it's great to have it recorded. And also, here in 2022, we've got these introductory psychology initiative and themes are part of that. It's been rolled out. And I think sometimes we get excited about the themes that they have rolled out. And I was part of that group. And I will tell you that I have been one of the voices that has continually said, we've had themes in intro psych since the 1980s. This guy, Wayne Weiten, wrote a book starting with themes and variations in the 1980s. So I'm glad to give credit to you and to have the story in your own voice.
Well, I'm thrilled to repeat the story and highlight once again for what I hope is a larger audience that it's Ruth Alt's vision. I mean, it's as far as we have themes now in the EI. I mean, it's Ruth that had that.
It might have been the initial kernel, but Ruth didn't run with it, and we both adore Ruth. Let's be clear on this. But Ruth didn't run with it and write the book and then revise it 10 times to make it one of the leading introductory psychology textbooks in the English-speaking world that we both know that it is. And you're too humble to say anything about that, so I'll just move along.
No, I couldn't do it without it, or couldn't have done it with it.
Okay.
It made a difference. It did.
Absolutely. I know I've kept you long. There's just a couple of things before I let you go, I really would love to ask you about. And there's one untold story that I really want you to tell, if you will. Is there anything left? Any last thoughts that you have about that textbook and what it's meant for you? Any takeaways that you want to mention about your intro psych textbook?
Well, I think there's a very interesting story about the illustration program that we
Okay, please.
dive into. I mean, in terms of it, having enjoyed some success, I think the themes were a big part of giving it an identity. But I think just as important was we really did break new ground in terms of the illustration program. And a lot of the credit for that goes to the editor, again, C. Deborah Lott, put together an amazing production team. I don't know, you're probably not old enough to remember the Psych Today textbook, but
I have it. I never used it as a textbook or taught out of it, but I have some of the editions.
well, Psych Today came out in '69, and it was an instant, massive hit. And what made it a massive hit was its illustration program, which was extraordinarily innovative, not always pedagogically sound. They worked more to be pretty than to get points across effectively. But it became the bestseller instantly, and continued. The problem with it was it didn't have an author. It was one of these managed books,
Right.
and had very uneven content. And the illustration program, although exciting, was not well thought out pedagogically. But anyway, this ended up working in my favor. The Psych Today book was created in Del Mar, California by a small startup publisher called CRM.
Right. Yeah.
And they were bought out by Random House, who absconded with the book to New York, stranding all these creative types in Del Mar with no textbook to work on. And so my editor, C. Deb, somehow was aware of all that. And so when it came time to do my book, I had said to her, look, I really want to work on, I really want to break new ground with the illustration program. And I explained to her what I wanted to do with it. And she said, I know where to find the people who do this. If we just, make sure that we concentrate more on the educational soundness, as well as creating a book that is visually stunning. So she went down to Del Mar and recruited all of these incredible creative types. And I had the incredible good fortune to work with the people who created the Psych Today illustration program. Only we did it differently this time. I mean, we really worked more on its educational value. And that made a big difference. I mean, because the thing is, with a textbook, especially when there are 50 intro textbooks out there, people just kind of thumb through it. And so if you see an illustration program that looks unlike anything you've ever seen before, and of course, nowadays you go back and look at the 1989 version, it looks like they all look like. But at that time, that wasn't the case. They were a lot of dense black print. And when they had illustrations, they weren't put together by the authors. The authors had no input on that stuff.
Right.
They just slapped together any old garbage, and half the time it was misleading, inaccurate. They missed all sorts of opportunities to enhance students' understanding of things by creating diagrams from scratch. And so I thought that the illustration program is also a big part of the books being successful. And it too has kind of a weird story behind it. I mean, go figure that we could hook up with the CRM team, which was incredibly creative.
Well, I just remember it being such, I started teaching in 92, and it was such a competitive time that you would look for any advantage, whether it was the illustration program or, the ancillaries or the level of service that the textbook rep was going to provide. Was a real competitive advantage. And so, once you had the book, then knowing that the features were pedagogically sound really did make a difference. It was getting the adoption, then keeping the adoption, right? There's two separate processes. We're really going for. They still are, but it feels different somehow these days.
They are different these days. One last tidbit about Intro book coming out in '89. Guess who my first letter of congratulations came?
I'll David Myers.
Yep. Does he do that with everybody?
Well,
I don't know.
I don't have an intro book, but yeah.
I suppose the book had not been out 3 months, and I get a letter. And David and I had not met at that point. But I get a letter from Dave Myers, a lengthy letter going on and on and on about how much he likes all this, and that about the book. And so what a gentleman. Now, I can't rule out the possibility he does that with everybody because it's that nice. But yeah,
I think like you, he is genuinely that nice. And I don't know if he sends it to everybody either. I have no idea. And I suspect that in your very rare air of intros of highly successful intro psych textbook authors. Maybe others looking from the outside in think you're competing against each other. My guess is that you're competing against your last editions that you're revising up to the next edition. I mean, you've got your brand, you're in your 10th, 11th, 12th edition. You've got your briefer, you've got your modules, you've got your loose leaf, you've got your Canadian edition, you've got 42 different versions, and so does he. You're probably not competing against him per se. Or is that
interesting? Well, yeah, here's the thing. The market is big enough to have lots of people be successful. And so you don't need to think about it as a competition.
Right.
Most of us do not. I mean, so I've got a lot of intro authors numbered among close friends, and we just we don't not that way.
Yeah,
there's a way to have success.
Yeah, Sue France and I organized a number of years ago at some of the regionals. Whoever was going to be there, we'd put intro psych authors together in a symposium from different publishers and just have an open forum, because people are like myself curious about the process, and it'd be really cool to see 4 different intro psych authors or co-authors from 4 different publishers, and you could see that many of them were friends and they knew each other's books, not in a competitive cutthroat way, but in a friendly, oh yeah, I really love what you did in your chapter 6. I wish I could get my people to do that. I mean, it was admirational. It wasn't confrontational.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah. Which is a really cool thing, I think, about most teachers of psychology.
Well, we all appreciate what each of us has to go through to even pull this off. I mean, it is a pretty massive undertaking, and staying on top of things is a big commitment. And so we appreciate how hard each of us has to work at it.
Absolutely.
And I've never heard anybody say anything bad about a fellow author that I can think of.
There's no reason to. Wayne, I've almost kept you an hour and a half, and there's one topic I want to bring up, and I apologize right now because it's going to make you uncomfortable because it involves praising you, and I'm sorry. I apologize. Praising you, I can tell, makes you uncomfortable. The Society for the Teaching of Psychology, APA Division II, STP, has benefited greatly from your negotiating skills. Now, when you get a chance to tell your part of the story, you're going to say that you were just one of many in the room, and you just did your part, and you're going to do the thing that I've listened to you do for the past hour and 26 minutes, and because you're very kind about this. But as a successful author of 2 leading books, and who knows how many other contracts, you have contractual negotiation skills that not many other rank and file faculty members have. I'm not even going to wait for you to agree with that because I know it to be true. So I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, the journal for STP is Teaching of Psychology. I believe its contract ended with Taylor and Francis. It was going out to bid. Am I right so far about that part?
Well, you jumped ahead a little bit. Taylor and Francis would be the second negotiation.
All right. So so for decades, including some of the decades I was part of STP early on, STP was like many other academic organizations, cash poor. I remember hearing Charles Brewer tell stories about they would gather at APA at the National Convention and pass the hat to pay for the breakfast that morning, which was, stale bagels and orange juice. I mean,
that's absolutely accurate. That is not an apocryphal story. That happened for years on end because the hotels, APA stays in nice hotels. If you order breakfast from the hotel, it would have cost 15% of our annual budget or something.
So STP for the longest time was cash poor, didn't just, operated on a shoestring, like teachers often do. And I don't remember what year it was, but I think I was secretary of STP at the time. So this is the only reason why I knew a little bit of what was going on. And the contract to publish Teaching of Psychology was up with the current publisher, and there was a bidding negotiation process, and you were part of the team of people who helped represent STP in negotiating the next 10-year contract.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fairly accurate? Okay.
Everything is accurate.
All right.
It leaves out some stuff that came before, but it's all accurate.
All right. Thank you. And here's the thing. One of the main reasons why STP has the programming, the support, the grant program, the instructional resource grants, why they can support stipends and buyouts for officers and committee members, why STP has over $1 million in their bank account right now is because people like Wayne Weiten and maybe a couple others who were with him in the room that day negotiated the first time it was a 10-year deal with, was it Sage?
Sage is who we're currently with, yes.
Was the first 10 years Taylor and Francis?
We originally were with Lawrence Earlbaum and Associates up until 97. That was the first opportunity to have a renegotiation. We ended up re-signing with them, but then Larry retired and sold his company to Taylor and Francis, and so they finished that tenure. And so the next opportunity to renegotiate was 2010.
But every person who's ever told me this story it's because of your savvy in that room. I believe the first time it was a 10-year payout from the publisher to STP of $140,000 a year for 10 years, 1.4 mil. And then when it was re-upped, the next 10-year contract was $170,000 a year for 10 years, 1.7 mil. And maybe the numbers aren't that important other than your savvy, your generosity in negotiating that and having that experience that you brought to that table has given STP financial security that it never experienced in its 75-year history up until those points in time.
Okay, you ready to hear the story of the unsung hero in this?
As long, first of all, yes. And hopefully you'll take the due credit you're deserved.
I will take some, but I've been given too much, as is often the case. All right, to put it, to give you exact numbers, because I knew you were going to ask about this, so I looked it up. In the 90s, we were, Earlbaum gave us just a standard contract. It's not their job to give us a lucrative contract. It's our job to negotiate it. That's one of the things I learned from Claire Verdoin. And Larry was a great guy, but it was not a favorable contract. So we were losing about $20,000 a year in the 1990s on our journal, which chewed up a lot of the money that came in as dues. The first negotiation was 1997. And in order to conduct an effective, I was asked to do the negotiation. Randy Smith.
Sure.
Were put in charge of it. And I thought, well, God, I don't know anything about this, but I may know someone who does. And so I went to my former intro editor, C. Deborah Lawton. And she had moved from not long after my book, actually right around the time my book came out, her husband took a job in LA. She moved to Sage in the LA area. So she was at Sage. And so at Sage, you work on journals as well as books. So I went to her and she coached me on how to go about, looking at other publishers and so forth. But what she really did that was important was she wanted to sign it for Sage. She was very familiar with it. Back in her days as an intro editor, she read TOP. She had a huge respect for TOP. And so she wanted TOP for Sage back in 97. And I went, of course, to Larry Earlbaum and asked him, how they could sweeten the deal. And Larry was very smart, very crafty. Although I love Larry. I absolutely love him. He published us when no one else was interested. I mean, he became a great friend to the organization. But he said, well, you know what? Rather than, my coming up with an offer, how about if you just allow me to match whatever you think your best offer is? And so in 1997, CDEB put in a really aggressive offer on behalf of Sage. And I didn't think Larry would match it because it was going to be a big turnaround for him financially, but he matched it. And again, this is me being naive. He could have given me way more, I now know. But that's where we had the first turnarounds, 99, 97. Up until then, we were dirt poor.
And was it about 140 grand a year for 10 years?
Not that was not that big a jump, but it was a huge jump to us. Instead of losing 20,000 a year, we were making 40,000 a year. So that was a $60,000 turnaround.
Okay.
Which all of a sudden we could buy breakfast at the hotel, and we could fund a lot.
And the organization started to bank money. They started to have reserves.
Yes. So Larry then eventually retired. We were not real happy he sold to Taylor and Francis. We were not real, and not me so much, the editors, Randy and Drew didn't feel like they got the attention that the journal should merit. There were some fulfillment problems. And so next time our contract was up, and now with Taylor and Francis, we decided to renegotiate. And who do I go to again? CDEP has now moved on to Guilford. This time we decided to do a full-fledged 10-page request for proposals. Who do you think showed me how to craft that? CDEP sent me 2 of her best RFPs she had ever seen with all the names, blocked out. And that's what allowed me to put together this document that touted the society, touted the journal and all that. And that's what we sent out to the various publishers in 2010. And we sent out 6 publishers. One, the biggest, I'm blanking on their name, passed, but the other 5 all came in with really nice offers. And ironically, her former employer, Sage, was the one that came in with the best overall author, and has proven to be a wonderful, wonderful partner for us. And yeah, that's the one that came in at like 140,000 annually.
Okay.
And then the last one, and even in the last one, I wasn't involved, but Ken Keith reached out and asked me, how does the environment look? Do you think we can, are we going to have to give back? Can we do better? Whatever. And who did I reach out to again? But Steve, who comes back in a week and fills me in on how things are looking. And that's the basis for the advice that I provided to Ken at that time. So the unsung hero is my former intro editor, who I don't know, and I have great negotiating skills. I do a lot of homework, but I've gotten way more credit than I deserve for this. The real person who is responsible for our financial solvency has been heretofore unknown. Well, and I just really feel like I needed to correct the record on this. It's needed. If we were a university, I'd argue we should put her name on a building.
Well, first off, I'm glad you've had the chance to correct the record, because that's always a good thing. And I believe I predicted that you would deflect the credit, and I was right.
Don't you love it when your predictions come true?
I do. I really do, Wayne. And but of course, that it's only because you knew who to ask and who to consult with, and you had the connection, that STP got the benefit from that. So you can deflect all you want. And I am so sorry this makes you uncomfortable. I'm being sincere. But
no, I'm not that uncomfortable, but really, people have assumed I have abilities I don't have.
Well,
they really have.
But you do have abilities. You had the connections to know who to ask. I mean, I don't know about you, but I see this as the theme throughout your life, right? You didn't really know how to go to college, but you figured it out and you knew how to ask. You didn't know how to get into grad school, but you knew how to figured it out and knew who to ask. I mean, it really hasn't stopped you from doing anything. You didn't know how to write an adjustment textbook, but you knew who to ask and where to look it up and figured it out. I mean, you've always figured it out your whole life. It strikes me. Anyway.
I'm not going to argue.
What's that?
So I'm not going to argue with you. I don't know. I mean, I just...
Well, you can argue all you want. You're probably right. I've kept you so long. Any other contributions about STP that you want to mention? Anything else? I'll let you wrap it up. I'll try to let you have the last word other than thanking you at the very end.
There's just one other thing that maybe we should let it go with that. I feel like this has already been too congratulatory. Here's the thing. I'm going to wrap things up. I'm going to say I feel incredibly privileged to be able to serve in the role that I've served in, chronicling the progress that we've had in psychology for over 40 years now. I mean, that is a privilege. And the fact that the books have done well enough for me to continue with that privilege has been just a marvelous outcome for me. And I am, so happy with all the progress I've seen.
Well, I'm not the spokesperson for the teaching of psychology, but the gifts that you've given have been gifts well received, not only by students in our classrooms, but by teachers taking techniques from you or by indirect support that you provided to STP, as well as Rocky Mountain Psychological Association and serving as its president and so many other things that we didn't mention. So, Wayne, thank you for all you've done. And especially thank you for spending almost 2 hours with me tonight. I really appreciate it. And I think our listeners are going to appreciate a little bit deeper dive into you and your background.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you for, this works both ways. Thank you for all you do. I mean, my God, you helped found a journal that is going to be shaping our discipline for decades to come. So this works both ways.
This is what people do. They spin it around when they're receiving compliments.
and the podcast series. I mean, that's a fabulous contribution. So
thank you, Wayne.